Welcome everyone, my name is Sean, and today we are finally talking about this whole Rachel Zegler Snow White controversy that we've actually discussed on this channel before when it was about Peter Dinklage, but I think we need to get this whole thing out there in the open so you can understand my perspective, and of course, so that we can dip into the bank account of Jeremy from The Quartering, who has found himself a new white whale, a new Brie Larson, this time in a smaller, more Latina-y package.
Weird.
And that, of course, is the meme-worthy person that is Rachel Zegler. I was going to call her Zoe Zegler. That's a problem that I have. I might mess that up throughout the course of this video. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform. So Rachel Zegler, as you guys know by now, if you're clicking on this video, I'm certain, is the Latina actress that was cast for Disney's live-action reboot of their classic, I believe their first feature-length animated film, Snow White. Now, a lot of people say, oh, this is another instance of brownwashing. You're putting a person of color in a traditionally white role. In fact, it's so white that her name is Snow White. But the thing is, she actually genuinely looks like the character when she's in the full costume, and depending on where you are in the world, Hispanics are actually considered white people. But setting that aside, I have to make the point that I always make when it comes to any of these live action reboots, and that is, they should not be made. Things are animated for a reason. Animation is a beautiful art form. Animation is in no way, shape, or form inferior to live action, and all of the Disney live action reboots of their animated classics are trash in every possible way. However, Zegler has decided to take a little bit of a different tact.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
She decided very early on to trash this role that she was given, this highly paid Disney role, in a film that was initially, at least when they were starting to cast for this, almost guaranteed to make $1 billion, and tell you how unwoke this movie is and how they're going to fix it, because we all know your animated classics, the thing that started off Disney's legendary run to the successful company that it is today, needs to be trashed by a modern actress with her current year woke politics. However, she wasn't the first one to do this. This was actually Peter Dinklage's doing, which actually damaged this movie going forward.
There's a lot of hypocrisy going on, I gotta say, from being somebody who's a little bit unique, front row seat to some...
Really? Like what? Like what do you see?
Well, you know, it's really progressive to cast literally no offense to anything, but I was a little taken back by they're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White,
yeah.
Seven Dwarfs.
Sure.
So, take a step back and look at what you're doing there.
Yeah.
You know, that makes no sense to me.
But,
You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of Seven Dwarves.
Now, if you guys will remember, when Peter Dinklage came out against the Seven Dwarves, there was a guy called Hornswoggle who did an appearance on Tucker Carlson, who actually came out against Peter Dinklage. He was also a dwarf, by the way, because he said that Dinklage's woke offense to this particular movie was going to cost 7 dwarf actors their roles in this movie, and this is disastrous because they don't get a lot of opportunities where they have roles that are tailor-made for them.
I mean, my biggest thing is he wants to be progressive, and it's all about progression, and I support that completely. But the issue is him being progressive is eliminating 7 potential dream jobs from the dwarf acting community, and that's my issue here. Is he's saying he wants to move forward and do good for the community, when these are dream jobs.
But of course, Peter Dinklage, like many of the woke scolds out there, is a pull the ladder up behind him after he's already made it to the top, so he was unmoved by this, and the doors were removed, although I believe they're being added back now via CGI, which means you're going to have the dwarves in the movies anyway. They're just not going to be paying any dwarf actors to play those characters. Great job, Peter Dinklage. Now, this already set the stage for people to have problems with this movie, but then Rachel Zegler started giving us her hot takes on how terrible the source material was, the source material that helped build up Disney, the company that she's working for, and of course that she is to be adapting for the big screen for live action.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
So yeah, this is from Variety, and if you guys don't know, Gal Gadot is actually playing the evil queen or whatever. I forgot what she's called, honestly. I'm not big on the Disney animated movies. I haven't seen them since I was a child. Relax, people, relax. And of course, they're undercutting the material. They're saying, oh, she's going to be this brave girl boss and all this, which is something that Disney often does with their live action reboots of their animated movies. But one of the things that I find interesting about this is that they'll make these kind of changes in order to suit modern sensibilities, but then they won't change the stuff that should be changed as a ripple effect from that previous change, and you end up with the movie that just doesn't gel in this cohesive way. And that's the thing. These animated movies, the way that they had to hand draw them, they're clean, they're efficient. The live action counterparts, they have bloat, extra songs, extra scenes. They're always worse than the original. And honestly, even without all of this annoyingness from Rachel Zegler, nobody should see these movies, because they should stop making these movies, because they're inherently disrespectful to the original in a way that I don't think people quite understand, in a way that a live action reboot of a previous live action movie just isn't. And by the way, you can make your own Snow White movie. It's a fairy tale. A lot of people can do it. You can do different interpretations. You can do that in live action. I got no problem with that, but it's the idea that you have to reboot the animated movie in live action that really gets on my nerves, and it should bother more people than the actual internal politics of these particular movies.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Now, of course, she goes on to say, oh, it's so weird that this guy stalks her and all that, and it's not about the love story. And honestly, they could cut the prince's love scenes completely, because we're going for a different girl boss thing, which of course is the common trend in today's movies, and again, is not the actual story of Snow White. And if you're going to make this many changes, then don't reboot the animated movie in order to do so. Don't ride the IP coattails of the original animated Snow White if you're just going to trash everything about this movie. And by the way, again, rebooting the animated movie, I need to emphasize this over and over again, even if you did a shot-for-shot remake, is actually trashing the original, because animation is beautiful. You don't need to reboot animation in live action. Anybody who likes this is dumb. Now, that's all one thing. That's all stuff that we've seen before, but what has been incredibly funny is to see Rachel Zegler now backtrack on all of these things, because she's really upset that the Disney Corporation is not happy with her ridiculous performance.
Definitely pressure. The cartoon's so beloved. It's like a monumental moment in film history.
Yeah.
It was like the first feature-length cartoon movie, to the point where it won honorary Oscars, and all of these amazing things that happened for that film are the reason that you and I really get to sit here today, because it made Disney what it is.
So now that the backlash has set in against her, we all of a sudden see her do interviews. And by the way, this one is with the chick that was cast for the live action Little Mermaid. And I actually saw that movie, didn't care for it. Again, animation should not be rebooted in live action. I don't know how many times I need to say that. And she's talking about how, oh, this film has this great legacy and she really likes it, which is hilarious because we saw her before talk about how weird it was.
Weird.
And by the way, even in that particular instance, I'm not so much bothered by that. It's just this about face and the ungrateful attitude for being given this opportunity that is really rubbing people the wrong way. I happen to be of the belief that great actors sometimes can't stand or don't care about the source material. We see this a lot. In fact, Stannis Baratheon, the actor that plays him on the Game of Thrones TV show, doesn't care at all about Game of Thrones, and there's all these amazing stories from behind the scenes where he would ask the other actors what was going on in the scene because he came there to do a job, and he's one of the best actors in there. However, even though we see that attitude from him, for some reason it works for him because he doesn't seem to be going out of his way to trash the source material. He just makes it clear that he's not really a fan of it, and he's done other things that he finds more interesting in terms of acting. But Zoe Zegler, or Rachel Zegler as her actual name is now backtracking and pretending she's the super fan. And by the way, this isn't the only instance of her backtracking, but let's play this one so you could hear a little bit more of it.
Of course, there's like this pressure of being the first one, having to bring to life the first one, and obviously that's come with a lot of pressure that I've put on myself, and also, I mean, much like Hunger Games, there's just a very dedicated group of people who love Disney cartoons. I'm one of them.
So now she's talking about how there's so much pressure to bring to life Disney's first animated movie. It's the first one. It's so dramatic, and she cares so much about the source material. Ignore the fact that she hated the source material and said that she hated it repeatedly throughout her many various interviews and whatnot. And she also brings up the Hunger Games movie, which, by the way, a lot of people said that movie was going to be woke, terrible, trash, and all that. So I actually watched it, planning on reviewing it for you guys out there in the audience. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually found that movie to be pretty decent. Now, I don't like any of the original Hunger Games movies, not a fan of Jennifer Lawrence. In fact, I have an irrational hatred for Jennifer Lawrence in a bunch of different movies, and that's due to the fact that they basically made Mystique the leader of the X-Men, the hero of the world, because Jennifer Lawrence was playing that character, and I feel like she ruined the reboot series of X-Men based on her star power, and that translated over to the Hunger Games. But I found the new rebooted version, the prequel or whatever, to be a little bit more gritty. There was less crazy technology and all that, and she was perfectly fine in it. Also, she wasn't the main character in that movie, so I wasn't bothered by her all that much.
You know, I love everything that the Disney company has put out in the past a million years, 100 years this year. And so
100, that's crazy.
Now this part made me laugh because you have somebody who's going out of her way to trash the source material, making all these jokes, talking about how it's so weird, it's so icky, and we're not doing that. We're fixing Snow White. We know better than your rubes in the past. We know better than the things that built the company that she's working for. And now all of a sudden, it's not only that she loves Snow White, she loves Snow White harder than anything humanly possible, but she also loves literally everything put out by the Disney Corporation, which, by the way, means that she loves Song of the South. I'm not saying anything. She's the one who said it. She's the one who went over the top in her reversal. So that means Rachel Zegler, A+ fan of Song of the South, and that's just an objective fact. Now, it actually gets even funnier because there are particular stories that you would think are personal and related to Zegler's past that she's even gone out of her way to change in order to say that she's such a big fan of Snow White. She's the top tier Snow White fan of all time. Nobody loves Snow White more than Rachel Zegler.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 17 years.
So in this interview with Gal Gadot, you have Zegler talking about how she watched it as a kid, wasn't into it at all, and then she went to Disney World with her family, went on the Snow White Scary Adventures ride. I've never heard of it. I'm not a big Disney World person myself, and she hated the ride, found it scary, and she never revisited the character for 16 years. Fast forward a little bit into the future when she's on a late night show, when she's backtracking, and all of a sudden that very real sounding personal story of a kid being scared by a ride at the tender age of 6 is completely flipped.
Have you ever been to that Snow White ride at Disneyland?
I get stopped for photos every time I'm online for the Snow White ride, and it is I have to pretend like, oh God, well, crazy that we're in front of this.
Wait, how often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
I'm a narcissist. I don't know. It's always like my publicist Ashton was with me the last time it happened, and I was like, God, I hope no one, because every time they come up to me, I'm always online for this freaking ride, and they think it's like I'm standing there waiting for the photo op, being like,
well, you kind of are, you know?
No, I guess
like
so.
So first of all, I just want to point out that she's very upset at the fact that she, the character that is playing Snow White, when she's lining up for the Snow White ride that she absolutely loves, ignore her previous story, by the way, because she loves this, is being stopped by little kids who want to take photos with her, and she has to pretend like she is happy that the plebs, the human garbage, the refuge of society, the non-famous people want to take a photo with her. So already, not the best look. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying. But it actually gets even funnier going forward because Jimmy Kimmel asks her a follow-up related to this, and she completely reverses what she said before. Again, the overcompensation, the over-denial of her past that I find to be completely absurd.
Is that your favorite ride? I mean, that's a weird thing that you are Snow White now.
I mean, it's one of the original. I'm a really big Disney fan. I grew up at the Disney parks. My parents took me every summer.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's like, it is. It's a part of my upbringing. It's my favorite thing. So it's just one of those things
Yeah,
that comes with the territory.
Now, as you can see, based on that clip, we have a full 180. Before, this ride scared her, she hated it, never revisited it.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again.
Now, Disney's a part of her childhood, and her absolute favorite ride, because when you lie, you gotta lie extreme, is in fact that Snow White ride.
Is that your favorite ride? I mean, that's a weird thing that you are Snow White now.
I mean, it's one of the original. I'm a really big Disney fan. I grew up at the Disney parks. My parents took me every summer.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's like, it is. It's a part of my upbringing. It's my favorite thing. So
We have Rachel Zegler trying to rescue this, trying to right this ship. She's already slammed into the iceberg. She's trying to find a lifeboat, but it's so obvious, especially when you see these clips, that this is somebody being incredibly disingenuous. Now, to be clear, like I said, you don't have to be a fan of the original source material to do a good job. Obviously, this has happened before. I gave you examples throughout this video, but because of this controversy surrounding Rachel Zegler, because of the whole thing with Peter Dinklage and the dwarfs, this movie seems to be set up for an absolute disaster. And by the way, in response to this, the Daily Wire has actually put out their own version of Snow White to compete with the Disney version that stars Brett Cooper, and I have some thoughts about that as well.
Once upon a time, in time a prince would come. Once upon a time, but now that time is gone.
Now, full disclosure, if any of you who saw my review of the first half of the Candace Owens response to Making a Murderer, the Stephen Avery thing, I received screeners from the Daily Wire in that particular instance. That being said, this does not skew my judgment in any way. I don't get why all the conservatives are so hyped for this Snow White thing. First and foremost, I don't get the appeal of seeing people who are hosts that talk about politics take up acting roles. This does not seem particularly interesting to me. And again, even though they're not rebooting Snow White, they're telling their own version of Snow White. To me, if the Daily Wire actually wants to be successful, they're going in the complete wrong direction. I don't care how nice that CGI gopher or beaver or whatever that is actually looks. In my opinion, if you want to make money as a new up-and-coming movie studio and you don't just want to do the conservative version of this or that, you need to go in the direction of horror movies. If you look at the economics of film, the only way to make profitable movies at low budget is to go for horror movies. There's originality in the horror scene. Sure, there's a lot of garbage in there, but look at a studio like Blumhouse or look at a studio like A24 that manages to have consistent theatrical releases due in large part to the fact that they stick to horror and they go with low budget, high marketing, and they get that out there to the general audience. I feel like the Daily Wire is a good idea in theory. Their whole streaming thing, their whole we're going to make content thing, and they obviously have some financial backing. However, there's just not the direction that I would go into, and I have no interest. I don't care what anybody says on the internet.com. I don't care if you're a fan of the Daily Wire, against the Daily Wire, a fan of Brett Cooper, against Brett Cooper. This, to me, just does not seem like the the way to make money. And if you want to be a successful competitor to Disney, you have to be a profitable competitor. You have to actually contrast them. Nobody is going to go in the direction that you're going. You're not going to be the trend maker. You're not going to make waves in Hollywood if all of your movies lose money. So yeah, it looks expensive and all that, but what's the point of it? Especially when, again, if you do horror movies, you can have originality, you can have profitability, and also you can interweave your conservative messaging through allegory, so it's not so heavy-handed, not so over the top. That's just my opinion. I've said it on Twitter. A lot of people are going to disagree with me. A lot of people will say, oh, but I don't like horror movies or whatever. But the thing is, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're incorrect. You're ridiculous in every possible way. And you need to get on the economics of filmmaking like I am, because I know all things. I am the wisest man. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the Rachel Zegler Snow White controversy. Till next time.